Another interesting looking PlayStation 5. Let me show you what's going on. We have another ripped off fan connector. However, this one has been to a quote unquote shop, and I can already tell there's some interesting things going on there. Yeah, I'm not really sure what this is. I don't want to put any power to this system at the moment. I'm going to take off just enough that I can reach my soldering iron in there, and we're going to clean this up, and then we can test power. Because if they scraped off too much on this pad here, there is a hidden via there that could be shorted to ground. We'll take it apart enough to clean that up, and then we'll test the power on the unit. Okay, I've gotten this apart enough to do the cleanup at least. In order to do the cleanup, I'm going to need to set up my equipment. And while I set up my equipment, let me throw up my expected temperatures for this job. These temperatures are brought to you by the associate links in the description. If you go to my video description and click on one of these links and buy any of this equipment, a small portion of that purchase will go to supporting the channel. And I greatly appreciate you. It won't cost you an extra dime. Don't expect we'll use the hot air in this one, but I reserve the right to change my mind if circumstances should change. Add some flux to this disaster. Okay, looks like they attempted to use the solder wick technique. By attempted, I mean attempted. My argument with this shop is they told the customer it couldn't be fixed after they failed their attempt. And bring some indirect lighting in so we can see what's going on. Don't see anything too problematic actually. We'll have to do some UV cure protection around this because this little via here is our signal line and the rest of this is ground. We don't want those touching, but luckily they didn't scrape off this. Everything else seems pretty straightforward. So we'll do a little bit more scraping so we have more area to solder on these anchor pads. This should be adequate, this should be adequate, and then we'll do some protecting on this one, but I don't see anything that should cause us problems with testing power. Let's test power, make sure we don't have an additional problem. Okay, it appears we're powering up. Very good. That's all I really need to know. We'll shut it back down, we'll get it apart, pull the board, and go from there. That's a big dry spot. For your orientation purposes, we'll be working right here on the board while we're working on the fan connector. And when we service the liquid metal, of course, we'll be working here on this side of the board. First thing we want to do is address this via. I'm going to clean this up a little bit better. We're going to need all that flux off there, at least as much as we can get off. Okay, so what we want to do is protect anything that looks like copper surrounding this via. Because it is not ground. Anything that looks like copper around it will be ground. You can very easily short this line to ground and kill the PSU or just short the whole unit. I'm going to stick my UV lamp on there for a while. I want there to be a good solid cure on that because we're going to be working in that area and we don't need it flaking off or anything. Let it sit for a while and we'll come back and work. Okay, everything is solid and we are isolated. Let's do some additional scraping here. We do not want to scrape that via. That would be problematic. This should be enough here. And we'll be running from the via there. That one will be a jumper. The rest will be new pads. And the reason why we don't run a new pad on that one is there's just not enough area to solder on. I think I did attempt it once when there was a partial pad left, and it did not go well. Right, flux up, and tin, smooth everything out, tin everything up, flatten down anything that's sitting up high. Okay, let's eye this out and make sure we get it right width. If we're lucky, we'll get both anchors out of this one cut. And there, that should work just fine. We're not using copper tape for the adhesive properties. We are using it because it's a nice thin piece of copper. Pre-tin this guy here. We are pre-tinning the side that does not have adhesive. That's the side we're going to solder down first. Get them in place. It's very important not to make contact with any areas we don't want to. There are close lines. Solder them into place. Bit. That'll work just fine. Just flip this guy over, pre-tin him, same thing, pre-tin the non-sticky side. The adhesive will come off when we do our cleaning, so we're not concerned about it. The alcohol will take care of it. And the toothbrush. I'm just pressing down, trying to get it as flat as possible to the board. Nice and solid. Not going anywhere. We're not done with the tape just yet. I'm going to get 2 more pads. Need to be fairly narrow, but not too. I think we'll be okay. Pre-tin that. More flux. More solder. The solder will also really strengthen these. This one's just going to solder here, so we'll have to secure it down on the other side with solder mask. We cannot scrape the other side. This is not ground. This is the signal. I'm making it long on this side. We do want it straight. I think that'll work. Now this one we can solder on both sides because it is ground. Not perfect, but I think it'll be usable. Try and trim it a little bit. Solid. We're going to do our scrubbing before we put a jumper on. Get all this adhesive off, all the flux off too. So we're not as concerned about the flux right now. Adhesive free is what we're looking for. We'll switch irons again to our Pico pencil. This size would probably be fine for this one. We don't need to go micro jumper on this. Does have to be small, but not like stupid small. There are some people looking at this going, that is stupid small, but trust me, they get smaller. Okay, that's solid. We'll run it a little bit long and secure it down. We'll need to carefully clean that off. Push in one direction. We don't want to fatigue that wire. Make use of air as well. All alcohol and flux gone. For the next step, we're just to secure all this down with solder mask. except the jumper. Well, we'll secure this side of the jumper down, but the other side we'll leave loose. I probably should have left that a little longer, but we'll be alright. Now we make a mess. Probably going to tack this one down real quick because it's kind of sitting up, and I don't want it to cure sitting up like that. We'll grab a laser, we'll hold it down. We just need a good enough cure to get the rest of it on there without it popping up. The rest of this will not be pretty. Still wish I could find some of the clear stuff. The clear stuff I bought some that was supposed to be clear, but it turned out to be more like snot or pus. Anything but clear. And there were like little clear spots of it. I don't want it to look like a biohazard when I'm done. We won't be using that. The reason why we use the UV coating is to hold everything in place while we're soldering, because the solder joints, while solid, will wet once we apply the iron, and surface tension can work against us. The new pads could suck into the connector or slide off their connecting points, lift, all sorts of stuff. So these are basically like helping hands holding them in place so they don't move. Put it all over this. I don't want that jumper going anywhere. I could probably solder this down without all this, but it just kind of ensures I'm not going to have a complication. It's going to require me to remove the connector once I got it on here. And basically the only way to remove it once I have it on here without ripping it off, like originally done, is to use hot air, and there's sensitive stuff in the area where I just prefer not to do that. We need to set up and do another cure. UV lamp is placed. We'll walk away, let it get a really solid cure, and go from there. I hope you're getting value out of this video. Just a reminder, if you find you're not ready to tackle this, I do offer these services, both locally and mail-in. Just head over to micromage.repair, click free quote, fill out the form, and I'll get back to you personally. If you mention this video, I'll give you 10% off on your repair. Tin up. Very good. Have a look at their connector. I don't see any pads on it, so I think we can just go right to soldering it. Microscope positioned for that soldering. Start with the anchors. Get some more flux on the situation. It's a little too far up for my liking. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but it would help a little bit if it would straighten out. Flatten out. Let's get some good coverage in there. It's not going to end up being straight. I think it's a little off kilter, but it will be fine. Come on. A little fresh solder on that. Need to get a couple of wraps on this pin if possible. If not, we can just solder over. I'd like to get it under. If I can. A little lift up on that, just so we can get some clearance under there. So we're just going to solder it on top. I don't want to be fiddling with it, trying to wrap when we're too flat on the board. We're going to break this jumper and cause ourselves all sorts of problems. So just solder it as it is. Just got to make contact. Everything ain't got to be perfect. Fold this back over and solder it on as well. That's all I need it to be, is connected. Let's test out how solid we are. I am picking up the board with the connector, so I would say we're pretty solid. Doesn't mean everything's going to work, but let's do some cleaning and find out. And as always with these consoles, we have to deal with this problem before we can put it back together and test. Otherwise, we're just setting up for another problem. Oxidization. May need alcohol. Try to do it without. It's being a little bit tough. You know when you've gotten it off when the liquid metal will start to spread on there correctly. It's starting to spread on there correctly, so we will do some transplanting. We will also have to address the heatsink. But let's transplant some of this. It's not doing any good way over here. And gently spray it out of the... By gently, I mean we don't want to spray everywhere. It's in the foam, it's not doing us any good. It's off to the side, it ain't doing us any good either. Should be enough. Should be able to get like full coverage on the die. No dry spots. Ideally. Basically the same dry spot on the heatsink. No dry spots, no dry corners. Looks good. We are prepared to put it back together and see if our fan works. We are ready to test and see if our fan repair worked. I detect fan spin. Excellent. If you got value out of this video, I think you'll get value out of this one, and I'll see you there.